It's Gareth Whim box. It's Gareth Whim box. Welcome to Gareth Wimbox, episode 5. I'm not going to put my guitar down just yet. I'm going to play something now. I'm going out tonight, I'm feeling alright, gonna have myself a good time. I am no singer, but listen to this. So that is, as we all know, the start of Shania Twain's Man, I Feel Like a Woman, which, let's just say, is the soundtrack to a lot of my adolescence. Nevertheless, it's interesting about that. So, last night I was listening to a documentary, I was watching a documentary on the YouTubes about the Swedish thrash metal band Arch Enemy. And out of nowhere came that. That song. Now, the song didn't come out of nowhere. Well, the song came out of nowhere, but also the key came out of nowhere. And I remembered it, and I picked up my guitar, and I remembered it in exactly the right key. Now, this, for a reminder and comparison, or relative comparison, we have this from Spotify.
Let's go, girls.
Thank you, Shania. So you see that I remembered to pick up my guitar again, I remembered so that's in A sharp. And so the key is in A sharp, and that's it. What's interesting about that? Why is that interesting? Well, that's the sort of one of the themes of today. Remembering melody, remembering pitch, remembering key, and memories of today. Also, another overarch, so memory, music, remembering melody, remembering audio, and things to do with that. That's one of the themes of today. Another theme of today is inaugurated by our word of the day, which is veridical. Veridical. And it will become clear why this is our word of the day soon. But veridical means truthful or coinciding with reality. Veridical, truthful or coinciding with reality. So veridicality as a noun is truth in psychology and philosophy, or the degree to which something such as a knowledge structure is veridical. So how a knowledge structure is true. So in other words, how close to reality or fact or truth something is. So the degree to which an experience, perception, or interpretation accurately represents reality. Veridical. Truth. So I suppose one of the things you could say is that my memory of Shania Twain's song, its key, was veridical. That is to say, it accurately represented the reality of the key of the song. So we have Shania Twain's Man, I Feel Like a Woman, the melody, Gareth remembering the melody of it, and Viridicality, representing truth. So today's episode we're going to be talking about that. I've got a little prepped piece that I've written, and then I'm going to fly through a range of different things relating to these two, memory and truthfulness, I should say. Memory, truthfulness, and how sound is part of that. So in the year 2000, one night, I dreamed of a Jeff Buckley melody, and also how to play it. I woke up with the opening riff resonating in my head, and picked up my guitar and played it. Finding my cassette tape of Grace, I fast-forwarded the tape to that song, and to my surprise, the key was correct, as was the pitching of it. It was D minor. It was played in D minor. And my picking of it on my guitar was also correct. Somehow I had remembered the key, the melody, the chord progression, and was able to repeat this on my guitar and in my head. And I found myself at the time wondering, is this something that all musicians can do? Is this something that everyone can do? Is this something that only certain people can do? And I don't, there are some answers to this question today, and some answers, but they are not necessarily veridical, that is to say, there are debates about these things. But I remember being very surprised, another sort of anecdote really, is that I remember going to a gig in a pub in Bristol, where I grew up, and I remember being very surprised when I was watching a pub band that the guitarist couldn't tune his guitar. He was on stage, and he didn't have his tuner with him, his electronic tuner with him. So I actually stepped up to the stage and did it for him. I tuned it. And that wasn't grandiose. It was like I was doing him a favour. But I was really surprised that he couldn't tune his guitar. So I've always been able to tune guitars based on hearing the first note, the E, and then tuning everything in relation to that. I think most guitarists can do that. Most musicians can probably do that, but I'm not sure. I don't entirely know. I've never done a survey on this. But anyway, I remember being very surprised that he couldn't do it. So I stepped onto the stage and did it for him. So I've always been able to tune guitar by ear. And was this something that everyone could do, I wondered. And I didn't, and I don't think that I have perfect pitch, or what is called absolute pitch, which is something I'm going to talk about today. But I can remember intervals between notes, which is how you tune an instrument. So you get the central, you get the one note, and then you can tune. You can remember the intervals between those notes in regular guitar tuning. But why could I remember, for example, or how could I remember Jeff Buckley's key of D minor and know that it was right? Know sort of emphatically that it was right. So recalling that time now, I know that it's D minor, and I know that I can work out kind of relative notes to notes. But does this mean I have perfect pitch, absolute pitch? Well, no, I don't think so. And again, I'm going to go into this. It's what's called relative pitch, or being able to work out a note relative to another note. But what it does give me is one might express as something I possess. Is it something that I possess, that I have capacity to remember melodies, as my Shania Twain example works out? I can remember the key. Is this something I possess, or is it innate? That's another thing. Or is it something I've learned? Is it a learned skill from being exposed to music? And again, that's a really interesting debate that I'm going to sort of focus on a little bit today. Nature, i.e. innate, or maybe having genetic predisposition to that, or nurture. Also related to nature is there something in autism that enables someone to remember certain patterns? And I'm going to come back to this. I found out through a little bit of research that the idea of being able to remember songs in the correct key is what's called the Levitin effect. The Levitin effect. And from Wikipedia, the Levitin effect is a phenomenon whereby people, even those without musical training, tend to remember songs in the correct key. The Levitin effect, Levitin was a person, Daniel J. Levitin, in 1994, was a cognitive psychology study that he did. And in 1994, Daniel J. Levitin at Stanford University asked 46 volunteer students to participate in a study. On arrival, the students filled out a background questionnaire and selected 2 songs from 56 previously chosen CDs. This is from Wikipedia, by the way. Volunteers then attempted to sing part of their songs. Now, this study's result, the Levitin study, is really interesting. The study's result, his results, which I think have been replicated a couple of times, this study's results show that 40% of 46 volunteer students, again, these are students at Stanford University, there might be something about that, about access to culture, blah, I don't know, anything. Anyway, or intelligence quotient, or what have you, I don't know. But the study results show that 40% of these participants could sing a correct pitch in at least one of their songs. So 46 students chose randomly 2 CDs, and it says, the study results shows that 40% of the participants could sing a correct pitch in at least one of their songs. And 12% of them, so 12% of 46, hit the right pitch on both trials. And 44% hit the pitch within 2 semitones. So that is to say, 12% could remember exactly the pitch of the song, so 12%, and 44% could hit the pitch within 2 semitones, so really, really close to the pitch, but not quite. And yeah, this study was replicated in 6 other European labs, and these results in general the study showed 25% of participants could sing the correct pitch in at least one of their songs. So it's slightly lower in these 6 European labs. In Levitin's early study, first study, 40% of participants could sing correct pitch in at least one of their songs, and a broader study across 6 labs showed that 25% of participants. The European studies also had a lower incidence of people that sang correct pitches on both songs. So in the broader study, 4% sang correct pitches in both songs. So I suppose the broader study was replicated, and it sort of showed that there were a lower incidence in those participants. Nevertheless, 4% of people in a study of lots and lots more people, 4% could actually sing the correct pitch. So what both studies suggest is that it's a minority of people that are able to remember melodies. So I suppose I would say that I'm probably in one of the minority in that I can remember sort of things. Levitin, as it suggests, sort of tried to sort of come up with some conclusions about this, and it might be something to do with the recognition of musical patterns as they are located in the cerebellum of the brain, so there might be reasons for that, and also one of the really interesting things is there might actually be evolutionary reasons for the ability to remember things. Now, this is absolutely fascinating. I did a bit of a deep dive into a lot of scientific papers. Well, not a lot, actually. I read a few scientific papers from the excellent bibliography, actually, in the Wikipedia article. And I found this amazing article by Mats Larsson, which was published in... what's the thing? It's Animated Cognition, the journal, in 2014. And this is interesting. I'm just going to read the abstract of this article, because one of the theories of out of Levitin's study of people remembering pitch is that our ancestors needed to synchronize their steps in nature to avoid making more noise than necessary while hunting. So they had to synchronize the same footstep sound in exactly the same pitch, so that the animals wouldn't be alerted, so they would just hear it as a repetition of the same sound, and therefore perhaps less harmless than a repetition of a different sound, which would suggest that movement is coming towards them, or the animals' movement is coming towards them. So the abstract of this article by Mats Larsson, which is called Self-Generated Sounds of Locomotion and Ventilation and the Evolution of Human Rhythmic Capabilities. I love the titles of these scientific papers. This abstract says this. I'm going to read this. And again, it has been suggested that the basic building blocks of music mimic sound of moving humans. And because the brain was primed to exploit such sounds, they eventually became incorporated into human culture. However, that raises further questions. Why do genetically close, culturally well-developed apes lack musical abilities? Did our switch to bipedalism influence the origins of music? 4 hypotheses are raised by this study. 1. Human locomotion and ventilation can mask critical sounds in the environment. 2. Synchronization of locomotion reduces that problem. 3. Predictable sounds of locomotion may stimulate the evolution of synchronized behavior. 4. Bipedal gait and the associated sounds of locomotion influence the evolution of human rhythmic abilities. Theoretical models and research data suggest that noise of locomotion and ventilation may mask critical auditory information. People often synchronize steps subconsciously. Human locomotion is likely to produce more predictable sounds than those of non-human primates. Predictable locomotion sounds may have improved our capacity of entertainment to external rhythms and to feel the beat of music. A sense of rhythm could aid the brain in distinguishing among sounds arising from discrete sources and also help individuals to synchronize their movements with one another. Synchronization of group movement may improve perception by providing periods of relative silence and by facilitating auditory processing. The adaptive value of such skills to early ancestors may have been keener detection of prey or stalkers and enhanced communication. Bipedal walking may have influenced the development of entrainment in humans and thereby the evolution of rhythmic abilities. So one of the takeaways from this, I think, for me anyway, is that our ability to understand pitches may be related to literal locomotion and development of our bipedal capabilities, but also then that development of bipedal capabilities enabled us to sort of appreciate rhythm in a very, very specific context of hunting, and how it was important to mask non-repeatable or mask deviant sounds in order to enable hunting. But also then on the top of that, once we got our hunting done, it enabled us, human beings, to appreciate rhythm and therefore to understand rhythm and broader and then develop entertainment. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, I'm sure there are lots of other theories that do it, but so there may be something, this suggests, Larson's essay suggests, that based in our early ancestors, that we developed this ability that might have become latent in lots of people to really remember pitch, because it was a vital part of our understanding, but also then to develop rhythmic capabilities that enable us to appreciate and understand certain rhythmic things, and then also to repeat those pleasing patterns, and then if you're being avant-garde about it, to deviate from those patterns. So that is very interesting. So the Levitin effect may be the Levitin effect, which is to say the ability to remember songs in the correct key, may have an evolutionary basis, which I suppose has become less important. So maybe our early ancestors, most of them would be able to remember Shania Twain. Just this image of people sitting around a campfire listening to Shania Twain and saying, "Oh, I know what that melody is interesting." So we talked about Levitin effect, which is essentially what I've been describing: the ability to remember particular pitches of music. And of course, my question in my opening paragraph was to say, when I was younger, I was thinking, do I have perfect? Do I have absolute pitch? Now I've done some tests online to discern whether I have absolute pitch. The thing to say about that is that they are most absolute pitch signs. The most common, at least in the West, absolute pitch tests are based on Western classical music, and usually in the middle C scale. So when you learn the piano, you find out the middle key, and then you learn everything in relation to that. And of course, that can be a learned thing, and it also suggests that's one particular and non-universal musical language. So absolute pitch, if in terms of veridicality, the absolute of absolute pitch is non-universalizable. That is to say, you cannot say an absolute. If you're testing your perfect pitch or absolute pitch in relation to Western classical traditions of musical notation and designation or definition, then it might not be generalizable. Nevertheless, because someone that doesn't know the Western notation system wouldn't know that it was an A in that system. They would know the same note perhaps, but they wouldn't be able to describe it with the same notation. Anyway, absolute pitch. So again, another excellent Wikipedia article. Absolute pitch, often called perfect pitch, is a rare ability of a person to identify or recreate a given musical note without the benefit of a reference tone. So when I said I'm able to tune a guitar, My reference note would be any one of the notes from E, A, D, G, B, E, which is standard tuning on a guitar. So if you gave me an A, I could tune the D in relation to the A, or I could tune the B in relation to the A. Or if you gave me an E, which is the low note and the high note on the guitar, I can tune A in relation to E, D in relation to E, etc., etc. So that's a reference or relative pitch. Apparently, the frequency of AP, according to Wikipedia, in the general population is not known, but a proportion of 1 in 10,000 is widely reported. So there's been lots of studies into absolute pitch and relative pitch, and again, this article really goes into various different things. One of the things I found interesting about absolute pitch is this. I'll just read this. Absolute pitch is more common among speakers of tonal language, such as most dialects of Chinese or Vietnamese, which depend on pitch variation to distinguish words that otherwise sound the same, e.g. Mandarin with 4 possible tonal variations, Cantonese with 9, Southern Min with 7 or 8, depending on dialect, and Vietnamese with 6. So, speakers of Sino-Tibetan languages have been reported to speak a word in the same absolute pitch within a quarter tone on different days. So in other words, people who grow up, and another one, African level tone language, such as Yoruba with 3 pitch levels and Mambili with 4, may be better suited to study the role of absolute pitch in speech than the pitch and contour tones of languages in East Asia. So across the world, there are people that have developed absolute pitch in the crucial stage in auditory development in the child out of necessity. Because in order to speak particular language with particular meaning, or a tonal language, you have to remember the pitch, because otherwise you would be saying the wrong things and things like that. So there is something about where you grow up and the language that you end up learning, which perhaps has an impact on your ability to classify yourself or ability to have absolute pitch. So absolute pitch is a rare thing. There are other studies actually that suggest that a lot of us have the ability, but it perhaps remains latent in our ability. But absolute pitch is fascinating. One of the things that I'm going to go on to is in this Wikipedia article. It talks about synesthesia. I'll just read this. Absolute pitch shows a genetic overlap with music-related and non-music-related synesthesia, ideasthesia. They may associate certain notes or keys with different colours, enabling them to tell what any note and key is. It says, in a study, about 20% of people with perfect pitch were also synesthetes. Now, I'm synesthetic, or at least I have synesthesia. Notes, words, letters, and days of the week have colours for me. Monday is white. Tuesday is, for example, days of the week. Monday for me is white. Tuesday is pink. Wednesday is yellow. Thursday is brown. Friday is black. Saturday is what's Saturday? It doesn't spring to mind actually. So my association here. Saturday is another version of yellow, but not the same as Wednesday, and Sunday is purple. So and every time people use that word, those are the colours that come to me like immediately and vividly. So that's how I experience the week. It's the same with letters. I'm not going to go through them, but each letter of the alphabet for me has a colour attached to it and an image attached to it, and it's always been the way. And I was surprised when I talked to people about this that a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people don't have that association. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's the way it is. We're all different, etc. But this absolute pitch, as I mentioned, people have actually studies have actually suggested that a lot more people, a lot more of us have absolute memory or for musical pitch. In terms of the Levitin effect, I downloaded Daniel J. Levitin's article, Perception and Psychophysics, which was originally published in Perception and Psychophysics, 1994, and it's a really interesting discussion where he talks about this interesting history of debate in the animal learning literature about whether animals' internal representations are relational or absolute. And his conclusions are thus. I'm just going to skip to the end of the article. The present study provides evidence that, for at least some well-known popular songs, a larger percentage of people than previously recognised possess absolute memory for musical pitch. As he says, 12% of the subjects performed without error on both trials. Now, this is one study, as I said, it's been replicated in European studies, but it does suggest that a lot of us do actually have absolute pitch, but we don't actually, it's perhaps latent, and we don't actually associate it with music, or perhaps we don't use it. And if, as we all know, as the common saying goes, you either use it or lose it. So what we've been talking about is the ability to remember absolute pitch, and the Levitin effect of being able to remember memories. Then, in relation to absolute pitch, and so that's interesting. Now, how to develop this further? Well, this is now extending. I'm going to talk about my relationship, perhaps with language and rhythms. In my book Curve, that I've mentioned a number of times, I wrote about learning about poetry and meter from listening to the Babtist ministers or pastors speak in my parents' church. But I also sort of write in Curve about how this fixation on language and rhythm illustrates to me my early fixation on words, sounds, and patterns of speech, as well as sort of my anticipation of patterns of speech. And I am interested very much in whether that is part of my autism, my fixation on those sorts of things, and also my ability to remember things about music and pitch. I'm just going to read from the last poem, What's That Instead of Ego, from Curve, just a section where I write about this experience. How do I say? Relying on the simple equations of experience and lived life is never enough. Too much to distrust in entrusting all to an I. You've talked through others' words, talked as in twisted, through others' words with livid lucidity, as preparation for the counsels and consolations of the commonplace. The default of hyperabundant preparation and reading others' creations, resistant against the seam pops of sensible ballast, reliable rabbits. Too much reliance on potentially perverted lows and hors d'oeuvred honesty, like if it weren't so likeable, like glues or rules of univariance. The silent echolalia of the pastor listening child, for example, telling all those who aren't listening that all words are boringly anticipatable, or adumbrated in the logical functioning of syntax, grammar, and obviousness. Petulant child, scriptures as trite algorithms, mouthed outflank. Don't start him on hymns or hymnal equations, offset in indolent fourth intervals, diluted, desiccated, and demeaned done, grind out the grist of opioid-addled Babtist, relinquishing the ornateness of Victorian orchestral complexities, of the deviant defiance of meter and lexis, or form and order, opcoid oaths. Der Verwandlung, the child transformed into a rage ball of odd prick-kicking, where the prick is conscience and the kicks are trained always inward, but the false fascia remains within the parameters of the awkwardly ordinary, without the least learning that these pitiful pouts lean to present research. Point being, 'twas all grist preparation, the rudiments of the ready-made. The year released realization of the every not quite achievement of adulthood. Decisively, divisively, the familial feeds the foundations of deaprious distress. Dripping are the glutinous suet and sediment of the scaped goat. So, scraped goat. What I'm describing here is in this section is how I was very, very early on, I was trying to discern patterns of behavior and language to the extent that I thought that I could anticipate what people were going to say. So I remember having a very, very vivid experience of sitting in church and listening to the sermon of the pastor, as we call them in Baptist church, the vicar, and knowing what their next, and I remember mouthing what they were saying, but then mouthing in front of what they were saying, so I felt that I could anticipate what they were going to say next. Now, I suppose that could be logical, in the sense that grammar has its own logic, and you have expectations and anticipations of what's going to come next within a sentence. But to be honest, when I was young, I thought this was like some sort of super skill that I had. But anyway, I sort of repeated what they said in my head, but my repetition was an anticipation of repetition. So in a way, they repeated what I had said in my head is what I experienced. But the other thing that I mention here is hymns and hymnal equations offsetting in fourth intervals. One of the things that offended me about language, and I found quite painful, was like the bad language of hymns, and also the bad scansion in some hymns, which I found quite painful. And also I didn't like, without really realizing what I didn't like, or what I appreciated more, were Victorian ordered hymns rather than newfangled Baptist hymns, which I found offensive. And one of the things I really liked about Victorian hymns was that they were very, very ordered and very measured and ornate in their diction and language, whereas newfangled hymns, they had relinquished a lot of those patterns, predictable patterns, and to me aesthetically pleasing patterns, for more free-flowing scansion. Which seemed to me to indicate a fall from grace, as it were, of modern music. And I'm describing myself as a child, and obviously I was a very precocious child in that sort of sense. But that's how I experienced it. Now, what I'm interested in is that fixation, really, that I had then at the time. That sort of fixation on patterns of language and rhythm, and I still am, and I'm interested in how that forged my desire and constant the necessity of me writing, and whether that actually gives me, in inverted commas, sort of special access to certain patterns in language, or an appreciation of patterns, which enables me to do what I do, and which in some cases is actually quite disabling because it becomes kind of difficult to turn off. Now, where am I going with this? Well, I'm sort of really interested in our abilities, how we develop neurologically and genetically to sort of be predisposed to certain things. And I think that I definitely am predisposed to pattern recognition, which perhaps goes back to my ability to understand and listen to and remember pitch. Now, one of the things that is being related to autism and other neurological profiles is something called echolalia. Now, as I'm sure a lot of you know, echolalia is a repetition of vocalizations or other sounds made by another person, made by the world, so a repetition of things. And echolalia occurs in many cases of autism spectrum disorder as well as Tourette syndrome, and may occur. This is reading in the a Wikipedia entry for this, public domain, and it may occur in several other neurological conditions such as forms of dementia or stroke-related aphasia. The word echolalia, as Wikipedia says, is derived from the Greek echo, meaning echo, Greek word, or to repeat, and lalia, meaning speech or talk, so repeat speech. It is what the words come from. Now, I'm really interested in this, in echolalia, in repetition of patterns, because as a child, I thought that I was anticipating what people were saying, but effectively I was internally echoing the thing. And I still do that a lot. And one of the ways in which I extend that is in imitation. So oftentimes, almost uncontrollably, when I'm walking down the street, if I hear someone speaking, I'll hear, let's say, I'll do an example. So someone's walking down the street and I hear, and he said no, and I didn't know what he meant. Then I will go walk down the street after that, and I'll just go, and he said no, and I didn't know what he meant. And the thing is, like, I'm always trying to understand it, but he just doesn't make any effort. And then, so I've tried to talk to him about it. We went to counselling, we did this. But I'm telling you about Rebecca, it never really works, and I'm just fed up with it. As I said. Yeah. Anyway, so I do this, and I do this for hours. I will hear someone speak, and I'll take it over to the extent that actually it becomes a bit obsessive. And I think for me that's a form of echolalia verging on imitation and parody. And I've always been quite good at this is very narcissistic podcast, isn't it? Anyway, but one of the things I've noticed about myself is I'm quite good at imitating or parodying or other people, and what's the term? Ventriloquizing or not ventriloquizing, imitating. Celebrities and things like that. And I think that, again, that perhaps speaks to an ear for things. People that are able to do that, those sorts of things, they tend to have an ear for sounds. And that's what I'm interested in. But I'm particularly interested in, as an autistic person, I'm particularly interested in echolalia and those sorts of imitative practices in relation to what are called disorders, and what you could say is a sort of a heightened ability to do something. And I've read a number of studies on a number of memoirs and studies in autism, and I just wanted to bring out a couple of things. In Uta Frith wrote a book called Autism Explaining the Enigma in 1989. As the title suggests, it's not a particularly healthy book, and it perpetuates a lot of the myths about autism. But one of the things I found really interesting is the passage on echolalia, where on page 123 in Uta Frith's Autism Explaining the Enigma, Uta Frith talks about echolalia. Among the most characteristic, Frith writes, behavioural abnormalities of young autistic children is the parrot-like echoing of speech, hence echolalia. At least 3/4 of all speaking autistic children show this conspicuous phenomena. As a symptom, it can be observed in other conditions involving brain abnormalities, for example, developmental or acquired aphasia or dementia. It also occurs in the speech of normal children, like normal kids have it as well, but only at a young age. They grow out of it. Normal kids grow out of it. The language in this book is hilarious. The ability to echo short or long fragments of speech requires a high degree of expertise in processing phonological and prosodic aspects of speech, both as input and output. It requires the ability to turn attention to speech alone as opposed to other environmental noises that might go on in the background at the same time. Echoing of non-speech noises is not typically reported in autistic children. Uta Frith here is sort of the celebration of neurodiversity party without perhaps realising it. Because I would agree with it. I would say that calling echolalia an abnormality and parrot-like and conspicuous is another, and relating it, however casually, to developmental or acquired neurological problems is a terrible way of describing what is essentially a very benign and fascinating and interesting and lovely thing, echolalia. But this ability to echo short or long fragments of speech require a high degree of expertise in processing phonological and prosodic aspects of speech, phonological being the sound patterns and prosodic being rhythms. When you're researching, when you write about meter in poetry, you're writing about prosody, the prosody. So actually, what Frith is conceding here is that people that are do echolalia or have echolalia or echo actually have a high degree of expertise in processing. And I think that, from my perspective, I think that almost unwittingly from a young age, I was developing that high degree of expertise in prosodic pattern finding, and in prosodic analysis and pattern finding, and remembering speech sounds, which of course enables me to be able to write about formal aspects of writing. To turn to R. Remy Yergia's book that I've mentioned before, Authoring Autism, on rhetoric and neurological queerness. R. Remy Yergia, they write about a lot about echolalia and its interesting features. So on page 195, they write this: and so even though autistic people are known for their echoes, they are paradoxically theorized as being echo impaired, which is, we see a little bit, this is me now, we see a little bit in Uta Frith's book. To continue with Yergia's sentence, often this distinction is boiled down to matters of volition, whether people, in other words, whether people want to do it or whether it's involuntary. So they say, echo phenomena such as autistic echoing of phrases are largely considered involuntary, even if such echoing is done voluntarily. Such are the paradoxes of compliance, they write. Conversely, imitation such as complying with the behavior analysis demand to mirror her jumping body is regarded as voluntary, even if it is coerced and scripted. Now, what Yergia does brilliantly is to say that that autistic people need to reclaim this sort of what is described as a involuntary, or reclaim the ability to be in charge of rhetoric, to be able to use it as a positive thing rather than seeing it as an involuntary horrible thing, as they say on the next page, 196. The inventional possibilities of echoing are many, and that's true. And I think that's and to see it as a deficiency, as they say, relies on holistic conceptions of sociality and rhetorical exchange. So I suppose what I'm trying to do today is kind of reclaim that, along with Yergia, in Yergia's sort of spirit, really reclaim the positive and interesting aspects of echolalia, and actually in being able to discern interesting patterns, and actually skilling you up, as it were, to do great things with language and with music and things like that. We started with Shania Twain, but we started with the word veridical, and this is related to absolute pitch, synesthesia, but also echolalia. And I found this a really interesting article by Lucy Bouvet al., published in Frontiers in Psychology, in 2014. So Lucy Bouvet. It's called Veridical Mapping in Savant Abilities, Absolute Pitch and Synesthesia, an Autism Case Study, which is really interesting. Anyway, this is the abstract to this. An enhanced role and autonomy of perception are prominent in autism. Just read that again. An enhanced role and autonomy of perception are prominent in autism. Furthermore, savant abilities, absolute pitch and synesthesia are all more commonly found in autistic individuals than the typical population. The mechanism of veridical mapping has been proposed to account for how enhanced perception in autism leads to the high prevalence in these three phenomena and their structural similarity. Lucy Bouvet al. write this: Veridical mapping entails functional rededication of perception brain regions to higher order cognitive operations, allowing the enhanced detection and memorization of isomorphisms between perceptual and non-perceptual structures across multiple scales. I'm going to read this again. Veridical mapping entails functional rededication of perceptual brain regions to higher order cognitive operations, allowing the enhanced detection and memorization of isomorphisms between perceptual and non-perceptual structures across multiple scales. They continue. In this paper, we present FC. Oh, sorry. In this paper, we present FC, an autistic individual who possesses several savant abilities in addition to both absolute pitch and synesthesia-like associations. The co-occurrence in FC of abilities, some of them rare, which share the same structure, as well as FC's own accounts of their development, together suggest the importance of veridical mapping in the atypical range and nature of abilities displayed by autistic people. Now, I sort of thought, what is veridical mapping? And I think, to boil this down, I think what veridical mapping in neuroscience and cognitive sciences means is the ability to bring together, is the ability to map together and make homologies and make analogies between things that are normally unrelated in the brain. So in synesthesia, what veridical mapping would be is the connection of, let's say, a word with a colour, or a number with a colour, or a number with a sensation, or a number with... So veridical mapping in neuroscientific, cognitive realms means mapping together two different, facts or things which enable a memorization of things. But what I'm interested in is why they use the term veridical, which, as we've said, means truthful. Veridical mapping in a journal called Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews, there is a article by Laurent Mottram, AL, called Veridical Mapping in the Development of Exceptional Autistic Abilities. And their abstract said this: superior perception, peaks of ability, and savant skills are often observed in the autistic phenotype. The enhanced perceptual functioning model emphasizes the increased role and autonomy of perceptual information processing in autistic cognition. Autistic abilities also involve enhanced pattern detection, which may develop through veridical mapping across isomorphic perceptual and non-perceptual structures. These apparently different phenomena... So autistic perception develops a veridical mapping mechanism whereby perceptual information is coupled with homological data drawn from within or across isomorphic structures. This really interests me because I've often thought of myself and other autistic people that we're able to discern and connect patterns that other people, or let's say neurotypical people, don't connect. And I think perhaps that is describing veridical mapping, the connections between things that aren't normatively connected. And that may well be a development of, a neurological development, in the sense that you sort of focus on other things than would normally be focused on in the world, or at least you're able to, one is able to filter out irrelevant things to the making of these internal connections. But again, we come back to this notion of veridical. Veridical, to go back to our definition. Where's my definition? Truth coinciding with reality. Truth, the degree to which something such as knowledge of structure is veridical, the degree to which an experience, perception, or interpretation accurately represents reality. So what essentially veridical mapping, or the suggestion that autistic people have enhanced veridical abilities, is essentially, again, being of the celebration of the autistic community without autistic people without really realizing it kind of thing, is that we, autistic people, have access to, we can have closer access to truth patterns, or to patterns of truth, veridical mapping, or to mapping the truth of things through connecting perhaps ordinarily or normally unconnected patterns, which is really fascinating. And actually, despite the sort of fetishization of savantism and this sort of what have you, is actually an acknowledgement that there are certain people in the world that are able to discern truth more clearly than others. or at least discern patterns in things more clearly than perhaps would normally be capable. And I suppose one could argue and have a perception about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but just in and of itself, it's very, very interesting. So I love the idea that when we talk about echolalia, when we talk about remembering melody, when we talk about the ability to discern patterns and make connections between things, actually these are skills that perhaps are extolled in some walks of life, but demonized in others. So my sort of conclusion to that is I'm just really interested in why people use the word veridical mapping, i.e. mapping of truths that are hitherto unknown. Mapping of truths, veridical mapping, essentially means mapping truths. So to me as a young child, I felt that I was mapping the truth of sentence structure. But at the same time, I was developing this sort of hyper interest in the sounds of language, in meanings of language. And then perhaps dovetailed along with that, I was developing the ability to discern and memorize certain musical phrases and pitches. But just like Levitin's study on people remembering on perfect pitch or absolute pitch, perhaps many more of us have the ability to remember things, and perhaps many more of us have the ability to absolute pitch. And it's society and culture that normifies out our abilities to do that, perhaps because it's a threat. If you've got a lot of people wandering around understanding the truth of things and being able to remember things, then it makes for a non-normative society, which perhaps the norms or normies, no offense, want to perpetuate. Anyway, that's just going off on tangent. Anyway, so that was Gareth Whimbox, Viridicality. It's a quick one. Viridicality, echolalia, and memorizing this stuff. So it's Gareth Whimbox. It's Gareth.